Here we are on the fourth of the four tissue types. We've already talked about connective, nervous, muscle, and now we have epithelial tissue. And the title here tells you kind of the bottom line of epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue protects, and that's because epithelial tissue, or what we would call our epithelium, covers surfaces and protects them from the surrounding environment, from friction, and anything that might try to get through them. And really, when you're looking at any surface of the body, whether it's an outside surface or an inside surface, you're talking about epithelial tissue. And when I mean inside surfaces, I mean the inside of your mouth. When you touch that, that's epithelium. The underside of your eyelids is epithelium. If you go inside of the body and you touch organs, the surface of the organs are epithelium. If you take all the organs out and you touch the inside of the body cavities, the spaces inside the body, those are epithelial tissues. So these are really important tissues for covering surfaces and providing protection. It says they can be modified for secretion, absorption, excretion, and filtration. So lots of things go on in the surfaces of our body tissues. There's also another word here, the basement membrane. Epithelial tissues, the cells of the epithelial tissue being on the surface of the inside or the outside of the body, those cells are actually attached to an underlying tissue. Usually those are connective tissues. And so that connective layer, which is a chemical layer that connects the epithelium to the underlying tissues, is called the basement membrane. So epithelial tissues are named in a very organized way, unlike connective tissues that seem to have lots of different names, usually based on what they look like. But epithelial tissues have kind of more generic names. And there's two things you're going to look at. One is when you look at the epithelial tissue, are the cells in a single layer or are they in multiple layers? And so here it's showing you a single layer of epithelium is called simple epithelium, and multiple layers, one on top of another, is called stratified. Now, it shows you something in between here called pseudostratified, and I'm not going to hold you responsible for that, but if you took a more advanced class, which I know a lot of you are planning on taking PAP, they'll give you this word pseudostratified. Pseudo means false, stratified means layers. So it kind of looks like it's in layers, but in reality, all the cells are still starting on that basement membrane, that boundary between the underlying connective tissue and the epithelium. So it really is not stratified. It's just the cells are kind of different sizes. Notice this stratified epithelium, only the deepest layer is next to the basement membrane. The other word we look at when we're trying to name epithelial tissues is the shape of the cells. So if the cells are flat, we call them squamous or squamous, either word pronunciation is okay. If the cells are cube-shaped, they're cuboidal, and if they're elongated, they're columnar. So when you get down to it, in the simplest way, you can come up with 6 names for epithelial tissue. You can have simple squamous, simple cuboidal, or simple columnar. And those are single layers of flat cells, single layers of cuboidal cells, or single layers of elongated cells. There's stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal, or stratified columnar. I actually am not 100% sure there are stratified columnar cells actually, but I guess technically there could be, where you have layers of flat cells, layers of cuboidal cells, and layers of columnar cells. So when we're looking at epithelial cells, there's some nice pictures here to show you some of that variety. And you can imagine if you have simple squamous cells that these are single layers of flat cells. So they're very thin, they're very delicate, and one place where you'll find them is making up the air sacs in the lungs. And that makes sense because we have gases that have to pass through them, carbon dioxide and oxygen. So we have to have these really thin, delicate tissues. Try to show you there some simple squamous. If you look at these cells, we've got a single layer of cells. Here's the basement membrane. And so the cells are kind of square, so they're cuboidal. And so these would be simple cuboidal cells. And those are what makes up there's lots of these microscopic tubules inside the kidneys. And so they've got loads of these little tubules, these simple cuboidal cells. The intestines, the inside surface of the intestines has these elongated cells, and they're simple columnar cells. So a single layer of these elongated cells. You see them inside, lining the walls of the intestines. Common place for stratified squamous cells, the first thing I think of is the skin. And so this is probably a picture of the skin right here. Let's see. Because this is kind of deeper connective tissue, but then you start getting layers of flat cells, and that's what these are. These are stratified squamous cells. So here's the skin closest to the surface where it kind of flakes off. Talks a little bit about some different kinds of epithelium, and as we just talked about here, and you should be able to answer these questions. So good luck with epithelium.